I will now be discussing the geography of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is the largest country in Central Asia and is located between Russia, China, and other Central Asian countries, including Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. I will now be discussing Kazakhstan's hazard profile. Kazakhstan is especially prone to seismic activity, with devastating earthquakes occurring every 80 to 100 years. Experts say that Kazakhstan is in danger of facing a devastating earthquake in the near future. Kazakhstan is also prone to flooding. This is primarily due to spring snowmelt and mud flows. Kazakhstan is also prone to epidemic diseases. These include typhus and bloodborne infection diseases. Given these threats, here's an overview of disaster management in Kazakhstan. The country was forced to create a new infrastructure after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, leaving the Republic of Kazakhstan a newly independent state. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Republic of Kazakhstan created the Ministry of Emergency Situations in 1991. Since then, the Ministry of Emergency Situations in the Republic of Kazakhstan has faced difficulties establishing appropriate apparatuses in order to deal with the gaps left behind by the Soviet government. The Kazakh government has also developed disaster management structures with the aid of both intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. Despite this, there are still significant gaps in preventative action, response, and recovery systems throughout Kazakhstan. The Ministry of Emergency Situations is a top-down national government structure which helps formulate policy and legal frameworks for disaster prevention throughout Kazakhstan. The Ministry of Emergency Situations is responsible for coordinating policy and response efforts with local authorities and executive bodies in Kazakhstan. Here are some steps listed below that the Kazakh government has taken to help plan for, mitigate, and respond to disasters. Regarding seismic activity, the Kazakh government has created safety passport oblasts in order to help identify territorial hazards throughout the country. There is still not that much being done regarding flooding, but the Kazakh government has developed strategic goals in order to help enforce building codes in Kazakhstan. The Kazakh government has also taken steps to help plan for epidemic diseases in the country and has established branches of state utility, Republican anti-zoonotic squad, as well as developed transport centers for stockpiling medicines throughout the country. I will now be discussing other participants in Kazakhstan's disaster management system. The government of Kazakhstan primarily cooperates with UN intergovernmental organizations as well as non-governmental organizations. Regarding intergovernmental organizations, the Kazakh government primarily cooperates with UN agencies. These are primarily UNDP in Kazakhstan as well as UNICEF. On the screen are a variety of projects that have been implemented with the cooperation of the Ministry of Emergency Situations as well as these intergovernmental organizations. An NGO that often assists Kazakhstan is also the Red Crescent Society of Kazakhstan. This NGO works with local communities to help develop their own disaster plans as well as response to disasters and for teaching preparedness and mitigation efforts in local communities. I will now discuss disaster planning in practice in Kazakhstan. In spring 2003, a 6.5 magnitude earthquake hit Zambal Oblast in Kazakhstan, affecting 40,000 people. Despite the fact that the Ministry of Emergency Situations established an emergency committee with over 250 personnel who arrived in 72 hours, there were still failures at the local level, primarily due to the fact that there was little mitigation efforts put in place due to financial constraints. In response to these failures, the UNDP cooperation with the Ministry of Emergency Situations, helped develop a program called the Local Risk Management in Earthquake Zones in order to focus on mitigation and preparedness training in these communities. Now I will discuss briefly the obstacles of disaster management in Kazakhstan, as well as the future of disaster management in Kazakhstan. One of the main obstacles in Kazakhstan is our financial constraints. This is due in part mainly to the fact that local plans are often not implemented due to a lack of funding at the national level. Mitigation and preparedness training is also neglected. This is due in part to the fact that there are many rural and poorer communities that often don't have an opportunity to receive this type of training. This is also in combination with Kazakhstan's reliance on international agencies to help fund long-term work throughout the country. Another issue is the wide variety of disaster hazards in Kazakhstan. Uh, this combined with both urban and rural problems throughout the country, as well as preparedness planning and education. Uh, it looks as though the Kazakhstan government will receive continued assistance from its international partners, primarily UN agencies and the Red Crescent Society, in order to help develop and eliminate gaps in the Kazakh disaster management structure.